Welcome to Guitar Lessons for Beginners, video 1 of 6. My name's Jake with Guitar Gym Pro, and today I'm going to walk you through starting to learn guitar, and over the next 6 videos, we're going to get you playing your very first song. So we are going to begin your guitar journey with a focus on the basics, making sure we know how to hold the instrument, making sure we feel comfortable with the instrument, and all of those important things. Our goal will be to learn the song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken? It uses the 3 most common chords that we ever come across, and it's just a great song to play along with. We're going to build skills step by step from the basics to mastering these 3 chords. And as a bonus, I'm going to give you an effective finger exercise to help build dexterity in your left hand. So let's talk about the basics. How to hold the guitar is going to be the first thing. So basically, your guitar is going to have an arch on the bottom, whether it's acoustic, whether it's electric, however you do that. You're going to want to put that arch on your right leg. And if you're left-handy, you can just go ahead and switch, exactly what I'm saying. But you're going to put that arch of the guitar on your right leg. Now, I have a strap that I use to hold the guitar up. I put it on the strap buttons, and that does most of the work so the guitar is not going to move around. Now, you don't necessarily need one, but I do recommend using the strap because it means that you don't have to use your arms to control the guitar. It'll stay put, and then that leaves your arms more free to move around to play the instrument. So that would be my recommendation. Now you're going to come over the guitar with your right hand, the hand that you're going to use to strum. Now I have an acoustic and it's kind of a bigger instrument, and so the crook of my elbow is sitting there, and that's going to right on the corner of the guitar here, and that's going to give me access to strum. If you're playing a smaller body, electric guitar even, it might be your forearm that's sitting on the guitar for you to reach the strings comfortably, and that's perfectly fine. So that's holding the instrument. That's our first thing. Now we need to learn the names of the strings, how we're talking about our fingers, and then fret numbers as well. So the first thing for strings is we have 6 strings. Thinnest is on the bottom, and then the thickest is closest to the ceiling. So we're going to number these strings 1 for the thinnest, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the thickest. So I might say pluck string 1. Again, thinnest, closest to the ground, pluck string 6. Or pluck string 3, pluck string 5. Now when we talk about our fingers, just because we already have numbers for our strings, and we're gonna have numbers for the frets, spoiler alert, I like to use index, middle, ring, and pinky as much as I can. Index, middle, ring, and pinky, so that when we're talking about fingers, instead of saying 1 through 4. Also, if you've ever played piano, they number their thumb. We don't really use our thumb. It's a whole thing. So index, middle, ring, pinky. Cool? All right. Now, fret numbers are the next thing we need to cover. These little metal strips going down across the instrument are called frets. And we're actually bringing the string into contact with those frets to get it to make the string ring out. It'll be shorter every time we connect it with a fret that gets closer to the sound hole of the instrument or the pickups if you have an electric. So we just number the frets. 0 would be open. So if I said play open or 0 on the first string, you just pluck it. Nothing's going on with my left hand. Now, if I said play 3rd fret, I would count each fret. 1, 2, 3. And this 3rd fret is all this space behind the 1, 2, 3rd fret. When we fret a note, we want to be right up, close to the fret, not touching the fret, but just behind it, or behind towards the headstock, the tuning pegs of the guitar, just behind it. And then we're going to press down nice and lightly to get a clean note. So do that one with me. We're going to go to 3rd fret, 1, 2, 3 of string 1. So now we've covered our strings, we've covered our frets, we've covered our fingers. So now we're going to do some practical exercises to get used to that. I'm going to give you a string, I'm going to give you a fret, and then I'm going to give you a finger, and then we're going to play that note. So I'm going to say we're going to do 2nd string, we're going to do the 1st fret with our index or pointer finger. So 1st fret's just behind this 1st fret. I'm on the 2nd string, and I'm squeezing down, and I'm plucking 2nd string. Awesome. All right, let's try 3rd finger, or our ring finger. I said I wasn't going to use numbers. Ring finger on the 5th string. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to go to the 3rd fret. 1, 2, 3. Ring finger, 5th string, 3rd fret, and I'm just behind the fret. Okay, now let's try our pinky finger on 3rd fret, 1, 2, 3 of the 1st string. I want you to notice that my thumb is on the back of the guitar. Like I've got a thumbs up and I'm just kind of setting it on the back of the instrument. I'm about 50%, maybe a little north of halfway, not below it, about 50%, maybe a little north. And then I'm just rolling the tips of my fingers over. So the only thing touching the guitar is the pad of my thumb and then the tips of my fingers. That's our main goal when we're trying to fret these notes. Even when I do my pinky finger, you see it's just the tip of my pinky. And I want you to notice my pinky's rounded at both knuckles. I'm not pushing it back or hyper-extending it. It's just nice and rounded, and I'm on the tip-top point of my finger, like the point of the bone. That's really what we want to think about when we're doing that. The goal isn't to squeeze super hard. The fret is metal and is going to actually do a lot of the work. Our fingers just need to gently get that string to connect with that fret. So now we're going to learn our very first chord. So I'm going to call out a string, a finger, and a fret. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to leave the fingers down as we start to build our first chord. So we're going to start with that pinky finger on 3rd fret of the 1st string. So pinky finger, 3rd fret, 1, 2, 3 of that 1st string. And I want you to leave that down while we start doing this next one. It's going to be ring finger, 3rd fret of the 2nd string. So it actually sets down just right next to that 1st finger. Now I want you to notice my ring finger is a little further away from the fret, right? I said get as close to it as you can. Well, my pinky finger and my ring finger are trying to be in the same fret space, so I can't get much closer than I am right now, and that's okay. The ideal is right next to the fret, but the reality a lot of times is there's going to be a little bit of space there just because we have fingers next to each other, like we do in this first chord we're learning, G, as in giraffe. All right, we've got one more finger, so we're leaving those two down. We're going to take our middle finger. We're going to reach all the way to 6th string, and we're going to play the 3rd fret. We're going to give this guy a strum, and we're going to strum all 6 strings. Now, if you're getting some muted notes, you might need to just squeeze a tiny bit harder, adjust your hand position, get on the tip tops of your fingers until you're getting a nice clean chord. But I do want to let you know this 5th string right here is going to come out muted, and that is okay. It is on my chord too. Our middle finger is actually touching the side of that 5th string. We'd have to work really, really hard to get it not to, and ultimately we do want it to because that 5th string is not a part of this chord. So having it come out muted is a great thing. And you notice when you strum the chord, you're not going to really notice or hear that, right? Awesome. So that is our G chord. That's our very first chord. Pinky, 3rd fret of the 1st string, ring finger, 3rd fret of the 2nd, middle finger, 3rd fret of the 6th string. So now our next step is to memorize this chord. We need to get it in our memory. And so I have a 4-step process I use to help my students memorize chords. We start by grabbing the chord. We're going to recreate the chord that we just did. Pinky on 3rd fret of the 1st string. We have our ring finger, 3rd fret of the 2nd string. And we have our middle finger on 3rd fret of the 6th string. Right? That is our grab. Our next step, which I just did because it's my habit, is to strum it. We're going to strum it and make sure it sounds good. Especially when we're learning new chords, it's really easy to go on 4th fret instead of 3rd. And as soon as you strum it, you would know, I messed something up there. So we go back to this 3rd fret. That's what we're looking for, right? All right, so we grab, we strum. Our next step is to let go of the chord. And I want to totally let go. I'm not lifting my fingers up right where they are because I'm going to ask you to grab it again. We're going to do this in a loop. But I want you to really let go. We're erasing the Etch-a-Sketch that our mind has of our fingers and exactly what they're doing. Now, our 4th step is to imagine, and I want you to imagine 2 things. The first one is exactly what it sounded like when you strum. I want you to think about what that chord sounds like as your pick rakes over the strings. I know it seems a little crazy to be trying to do that, but ear training or learning to hear music and then play it is the number one skill we can have as a musician. Your brain does amazing, amazing things when it's trying to recreate something that it can really picture in what I call your mind's ear. It seems a little woo-woo and a little crazy, but our ears are incredible and we just need to practice tuning into them. And by default, our brains prioritize our eyes, right? Evolutionarily speaking, they're newer. And so your prefrontal cortex is like, sweet visual input. That's what I care about. And we actually have to work to focus on the aural or the ear or the auditory input. But when we do, it's insanely powerful. So that's just an aside. That's the first thing. We want to imagine what it sounds like when we strum. And then we want to visually, in our mind's eye, see where our finger goes. I'm imagining my pinky on 3rd fret of the 1st string, my ring finger on 3rd fret of the 2nd, and my middle on 3rd fret of the 6th string. And then I go ahead and I repeat it. I grab it right after I'd imagined it. I strum it. I release or I let go. And I'm imagining it again, the sound of the strum and where my fingers go. And I do that in a loop. I would say 10 times minimum would be what I would want to do as I'm practicing this, especially on a new chord. And if it's really new, I mean, maybe 20 times and then 10 times tomorrow and 10 times the next day. Doing these exercises really helps cement getting your fingers to cooperate and make the chord that you want them to make. All right, we've got 2 more chords that we need to learn Will the Circle Be Unbroken. So our first chord is going to be a C chord. Now this is what's really awesome about this song in particular, is we're going to get to leave our ring finger and our pinky on 3rd fret of the thinnest 2 strings. So let's get to the C chord from the G chord. I think this is the easiest way to learn it. So we remember we have our middle finger, 3rd fret of the 6th string. This is our G, as in giraffe chord. And now we're going to C. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move my middle finger from the 6th string down to the 5th string. When I strum this C chord, I don't strum the 6th string, just strings 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And you can hear the difference between the G and the C. We have that middle finger, 3rd fret of the 5th string. That's our C chord. Now, we have one more chord. It's a D chord, as in dog. We're going to lift up that middle finger. Remember, our pinky and ring finger stay put. We're going to set our index finger down on 2nd fret of the 3rd string. So string 1, 2, 3, 2nd fret. The D chord is a 4-string chord. We strum strings 4, 3, 2, and 1. That's our 3rd chord. Now we would want to do our memorization exercise, the grab, strum, let go, imagine, that we were doing on the G chord with each of those chords, right? We would want to grab it, strum it on the C chord, let go, and then imagine what that sounds like. Visualize where our fingers go and repeat it, right? Imagine, right? That's the whole plan for memorizing these chords. We would do it on the D chord as well. We want to get these under our fingers and feeling really comfortable. So interestingly enough, when we're learning guitar, a lot of times we think we need more strength or flexibility or something going on with our left hand. And that's really not true. What we need to do is we need to connect our brain to our fingers. I've just explained to you what to do. I trust that you're relatively intelligent. You understand 6 strings. That one's the first one. I want my pinky on the 3rd fret. But sometimes our brain says pinky, 3rd fret, 1st string, and our middle finger moves. Because our brain sees our hand as a grasping mechanism. It wants to grab a steering wheel, hold a cup, turn a knob, not play guitar. So we have to get our brain used to sending signals to our fingers. And so imagine that you have like a little 2-lane dirt road where your brain says, hey, tell the fingers to grab something. And that's been working great your whole life. But now you're trying to send a message down that 2-lane road. Hey, pinky, I want you to move exactly this distance. I want you to go to this particular spot on the guitar. And that message might very easily get lost on the way there. So what we want to do is we want to build a 12-lane superhighway from your brain to these 4 fingers. And so when we're actually holding down our ring finger and our pinky, we're getting this passive exercise between our brain and our fingers. We're having to tell them to stay put. They're getting a message, but it's the easiest message to follow. Don't do anything. Don't move. Don't lift up. Don't change, right? So this exercise, this 3 chords that we're learning are amazing for developing that dexterity in our pinky and our ring finger. So how do we remember these chords? Because I just taught you to play them. Hopefully, you're playing these 3 chords, you're grabbing them, you're strumming them, you're working on memorizing them. chord boxes is how we're going to remember them tomorrow. So we're going to start by learning the chord box for the G chord that we learned first. So I want you to imagine when you're looking at that chord box that I just popped on the screen, you'll see a couple things. You've got the G right in the top center telling you, hey, this is a G chord. You've got some X's and O's, which are going to tell you which strings you don't strum and play open. We'll go over that again in a second. And then you'll see some dots further down that have numbers in them. The dots visually show you where on the guitar you're going to put your fingers. And the number tells you which finger to use. So 2 would be middle finger, 3 would be ring, 4 would be pinky, right? So when you're looking at a chord box, imagine that you're looking at a guitar on the stand. Where the letter G is would be the tuning pegs or the headstock of the guitar. And down at the bottom of that diagram would actually be the body of the guitar if it was big enough. Only the diagram's only a tiny bit of the guitar neck. So you can see we have fret 1, 2, 3. That light gray dot in the middle of fret 3 is there. Fret 4 and then fret 5 has another light gray dot there in the middle. So you can see 5 frets of the guitar neck, and it's the first 5. And we only need to see that much because we're not going any higher than 3rd fret. So I hope that you're seeing, okay, 4 is my pinky. You can see that it's on first string, 3rd fret, right? On the right is our thinnest strings. On the left is our thickest. Remember, because you're looking at a guitar, like you're facing it exactly like on a stand. So that's our G. Now the X over string 5. Remember we talked about our middle finger is going to mute that 5th string when we have our G chord. That X is just showing you that it is going to be muted. You don't have to try to miss it when you're strumming, right? You're not trying to skip over it as you're strumming or anything. You can just play the whole chord. You're just reminding yourself, hey, that one's going to come out muted so you don't drive yourself crazy trying to get it to ring out open. All right, let's take a look at our C chord. You'll notice that 2 has moved to the 5th string. We have an X over string 6. And we have an X over string 4. Just like our middle finger mutes string 5 for the G chord, it mutes string 4 for this C chord. And then lastly, our D. You'll see we have an X over strings 5 and 6. String 4 is open, and we have that first finger, 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and then our 2, 3rd and 4th finger, 3rd fret, string 1 and 2. Now, these chords aren't exactly G, C, and D. It's what I would call a G5, like the number 5, C, sus, S-U-S, which stands for suspended, and then D, sus, which also stands for suspended. They're a little bit more modern sounding chords sometimes, though a lot of classic songs use them. This D sus is in Tom Petty songs all day. This C sus chord is in a ton of Pure Prairie League tunes, which arguably isn't that classic, but they're phenomenal. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is these are, a lot of alterations on chords that maybe sound a little more interesting or hip and may not work in 100% of situations where you see the chord G or C or D. But they'll work in at least 90% of the situations. And again, that passive exercise we get with our 3rd and 4th finger makes it so worth it to learn these 3 as our first chords. So that's why I recommend these. These are my absolute favorite for first chords. So we've got these 3 chords ready to go, and we're working on practicing them. So as a bonus, I am going to give you a finger exercise, something that is going to connect your brain to your fingers even more than what we already did. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with your pointer finger or your index finger on 5th fret of the 1st string. And you're going to put each finger 1 fret higher. So 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. You'll see all my fingers are down on the 1st string on fret 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now we're not even using our right hand. This isn't really a playing exercise. It's just an exercise to connect our brain to our left hand. Now I call it a spider exercise. A lot of people have spider exercises, but I do mine really particularly to get this huge neurological benefit. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to lift up our 1st finger while leaving the other 3 down. And we're going to move it to the 2nd string. Hopefully you can see me doing that. 1st finger lifts up, moves to the 2nd string. And then we're going to do the same thing with our middle finger. We're going to lift it up and we're going to move it to the 2nd string. Same thing with our 3rd. And finally, same thing with our 4th finger. Now we're going to go back, leaving 3 fingers down, moving 1 at a time. Index first, then our middle, then our ring finger, and then our pinky. All right. So hopefully you're seeing how this is working. We're leaving 3 fingers down. We already talked about the benefit of leaving the 2 fingers down when we're playing our chords. This is just supercharging that benefit. That's the whole deal with this spider exercise. Now there's 1,000 variations on this that I do and that I teach. There's a bunch of spider exercises. The key is that we have 3 of our fingers down and 1 is moving. You're sending a signal to all your fingers to do something, but most of them are getting a stay put signal. Now, remember, we want the pad of our thumb about halfway, maybe a little north of that on the back of the neck, and the tips of our fingers. So pad of thumb, not thumb, and tips of fingers are the only thing that are touching the guitar neck, right? So I'm going to turn that over. You can see the pad of my thumb. I want you to notice I'm not touching the guitar with my palm. Look at how much space is down there. We want that kind of space. And you'll notice in between each of my fingers, there's space, right? I'm not collapsed. My fingers aren't touching each other. You'll notice I'm pretty parallel to the frets with my fingers. I'm not pointed towards the neck of the guitar. Now, all these things that I just told you, space in your hand, not touching the neck, not having space in your fingers or having space in your fingers and being parallel to the frets, these are for this exercise, not rules of playing the guitar. So you'll notice when I'm playing this C chord, my fingers are pointed kind of towards the guitar, or the G chord, right? Like that's how I get my fingers all on the same fret. But for this exercise, I'm having you parallel. So I don't want you to think these are hard and fast rules every time you grab the guitar neck. Now, likely your ring finger and your middle finger are going to want to be closer together than mine are. I've been doing this exercise for over 20 years at this point. And so I've gotten to a place where I'm really, really comfortable with it. And I hope it tells you something about the exercise that 20 years in, I'm doing variations of this every time I pick up the instrument. This is the exercise. I say all that to say, don't get discouraged if your hand doesn't look quite like mine, but know kind of where the ideal is and what you're going for and experiment with hand positioning. The last thing that I want you to think about is there's so many ways to approach guitar technique, how we interface with the instrument and get it to make the sounds we want it to. There is one thing that is the most important, and I just want to instill this in you in your first lesson. Tension is the enemy. So people will say, you can't bend your wrist this way, you can't bend your wrist that way, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. And a lot of times they're right for various reasons. But we all have different anatomy. I have short pinkies compared to the rest of my fingers. So I have long fingers, except my pinkies are not very long. So there's a lot of chord shapes and things that I've had difficulty with throughout my playing career and modifications I've had to make to deal with that pinky. But I also have really long thumbs, so I'm able to use my thumb to fret chords sometimes. I know Jimi Hendrix is, famous for having supposedly done that, but a lot of players can't or don't. I'm not suggesting one way is better or the other, but what I'm suggesting is whenever you're playing, whenever you're deciding if something is good technique or if you're incorporating it into your playing, if it's how you want to do it, the question I want you to ask yourself is, am I tense? Is there tension in my fingers, in my hands, in my wrists, in my shoulders? Take a second. Are you curling your toes? Are you clenching anywhere? Make sure that you're relaxed when you're playing it, especially at a slow tempo. Because if you can play it relaxed, that is good technique. And that's the thing that matters the most. So now it is time to go play some guitar. You've got the chords. You can go back. You can pause the video. I'll have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, some extra videos on this. We're going to go into learning the song, but I want you to pause here and work on that. So if you're ready to keep going, this video up here is going to be for you. Next steps. Let's get into it.